All right, guys, welcome back to another video. This video is about the menstrual cycle and fetal development. So those are the last two parts that you guys need for your project. So we'll get right into it. The menstrual cycle has 4 phases, starting with the menstrual phase. This is when the lining of the uterus sheds, and that's when bleeding happens during the cycle. That happens if there was no pregnancy, so this lining is not needed. The uterine lining is rich in nutrients, and so if there was a pregnancy, that would need to stay and be there to help develop the fetus. So when the menstrual phase occurs, that means that there is no pregnancy occurring. After the menstrual phase is the follicular phase. This is largely occurring in the ovaries. During the follicular phase, a follicle is formed. That's what this is showing right here. A follicle is like a tiny sac of fluid that nurtures an egg to develop from the ovaries. So in the ovaries, that's where all the female gametes are stored, all the eggs. And a follicle forms around one of the eggs and starts to nurture it into a mature egg. After the follicular phase, we have the ovulation phase. That's once that egg has fully matured, and it's in here, right there, it is released into the fallopian tube. So ovulation just means releasing an egg. So that egg is in the fallopian tube, and that is where either fertilization occurs or it does not. So if fertilization occurs, that would turn that egg into a zygote. If fertilization does not occur, that egg would just remain unfertilized and no pregnancy would occur. You can also see throughout the stages after the menstrual cycle, once the uterine lining was shed, it starts building back up throughout the follicular phase and the ovulation phase. That's to prepare the uterus in case there is a pregnancy. So throughout the menstrual cycle, that uterine lining is building back up to prepare the uterus to nurture a zygote if fertilization occurs. After ovulation is the luteal phase. This is the phase when implantation would occur. So we can see now that that egg is in the uterus. So if that egg had been fertilized during the ovulation cycle or during the ovulation phase, that would mean we're getting a pregnancy. If that egg was not fertilized, now we're going to go back up to the top and shed that uterine lining over again. So what we're saying here is if sperm was present when the egg was in the ovulation phase, now we're going to get a pregnancy, which means that that zygote is going to implant on the wall of the uterus and start to develop into a fetus. If that egg was not fertilized because there was no sperm, it would be released with the uterine lining out of the vagina during the menstrual phase. All right, let's continue our explanation as if fertilization occurred. So if there was sperm present during ovulation, we now get this fertilized egg. We, of course, also know that to be called a zygote. Once that zygote is formed, we really just have that one cell here. And what needs to start happening now is cell division to create more cells and start developing this one cell into the trillions of cells that will form the full fetus. So this cell division is called mitosis. So these cells divide and divide and divide through mitosis, and they're making identical copies of themselves. So at first, we just have these multiple cells that are just identical copies of themselves until we start to form this blastocyst. The blastocyst is an important stage in fetal development because this is when the placenta forms. The placenta is super important because it provides oxygen and nutrients to the fetus as it develops. As the fetus continues to develop, these cells can't just remain identical anymore. They need to start to specialize and gain specific functions to build the different organs for the fetus. So that happens through So that happens through mitosis and differentiation. So it is going to continue to, all the cells are going to continue to divide through mitosis, but they're not just going to create identical cells anymore. They're also going to do differentiation, where stem cells gain specialized structures and functions to build the organs for the fetus. You guys have seen this visual before, but differentiation is when all of these identical cells from before start to get real purposes. So we know we don't have all completely identical cells. Our muscles are different. Our muscle cells are different. Our skin cells are different. Our bone cells, our blood cells, our nerve cells. So as the fetus forms, it starts to need a brain and lungs, a heart, muscles, intestines, stomachs, bones. All of that needs to form through mitosis and differentiation happening together. I'm just going to recap here what the differences would be if reproduction was occurring versus if no reproduction was occurring. So if reproduction was occurring, we would have ovulation occur. The egg would be released into the fallopian tube, and fertilization would happen, where the sperm meets the egg. It would form a zygote. The zygote would then be developing and implanting into the uterine wall. It would use all that nutrient-dense uterine lining to start to develop and nourish itself as it continued to develop through fetal development, like we just talked about. This all would only happen if sperm were present in the fallopian tube during ovulation. After implantation, the embryo will continue to grow and develop for 9 months, and as we said, the placenta will form. If no reproduction was occurring, that would be because there was no sperm present during ovulation. So that would mean that ovulation would occur, the egg would travel through the fallopian tube, get to the uterus, and then the luteal phase would happen, and the uterine lining would shed and release the egg out of the vagina. Just some key points here. Number 1, there are 4 phases of the menstrual cycle that prepare the uterus for pregnancy. Number 2, pregnancy obviously only occurs if sperm is present to fertilize the egg. If not, the menstrual cycle just starts right back over. And number 3, if pregnancy is occurring, fetal development occurs over 9 months and happens through the processes of mitosis and differentiation. If you need any of this repeated back, go back to the beginning of the video and rewatch. Good luck on your projects, and remember to email us next week if you have any questions throughout the process of doing your project.